She was once called the most hated woman in Britain. Branded a homewrecker by global headlines, her private life was exposed through humiliating leaked tapes, and she was forever cast as the villain in the tragic story of a beloved princess. Nicknamed the Rottweiler, she became the living symbol of a royal fairy tale's scandalous collapse, a figure of intense public scorn for decades. So how did this woman, once a national pariah, navigate a 30-year storm of relentless scrutiny to finally wear the crown? This is the story of that woman, Camilla Parker Bowles. Her improbable journey from the heart of the British aristocracy to its greatest outcast and back again begins long before the world ever knew her name, in a world governed by secret connections and unspoken rules. To understand Camilla, you have to understand the world that created her. She was born in 1947 into a Britain still bearing the scars of World War II. It was a society clinging to its traditions, especially among the upper classes, a world of faded grandeur where the old rules still mattered, perhaps more than ever. This was a world of country estates with sprawling, slightly overgrown gardens, of muddy boots by the back door, of exhilarating fox hunts on crisp autumn mornings, and of the all-important London season, culminating in the debutante balls where young women were presented to society. In this world, a woman's ultimate career goal, the very measure of her success, was to marry well. And Camilla Shand, as she was then known, was born with a significant head start. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, was a decorated war hero, a man who had faced the horrors of El Alamein and Dunkirk and had spent years as a prisoner of war. He was the embodiment of quiet, upper-class resilience, a steady and deeply loving figure who adored his children. He was the one who would read them bedtime stories, instilling in Camilla a lifelong love of books. He was her rock. Her mother, Rosalind, hailed from the wealthy aristocratic family of the Barons Ashcombe. She was the one who managed the household and understood the intricate social codes that governed their lives. They weren't royals, but they were firmly embedded in the elite circles that orbited the monarchy. Their home, a charming former rectory in Sussex called the Lanes, wasn't a palace, but it was idyllic. It was the kind of home that smelled of wet dogs and wood smoke, a place of joyous, boisterous chaos. It was a childhood filled with ponies, gardens, and a sense of freedom that was a world away from the stiff, formal upbringing Prince Charles was enduring at the very same time. But there was a secret, a piece of family lore that gave the Shands an extra glimmer of prestige, a story Camilla herself loved to tell. Her maternal great-grandmother was a woman named Alice Keppel, and Alice Keppel was the long-time celebrated mistress of King Edward VII, the great-great-grandfather of Prince Charles. Now we have to pause here because this connection is more significant than it sounds. Alice Keppel wasn't some backstreet affair. She was a respected society hostess, a woman of immense charm, intelligence, and above all, discretion. She was so indispensable to the king that his own wife, Queen Alexandra, not only tolerated her, but would invite her to the palace to cheer him up. When the king was on his deathbed, it was the queen herself who made sure Alice was brought to his side for a final farewell. This was the legacy passed down in Camilla's family, not one of scandal, but of a woman who knew how to operate at the very highest level of power, who could captivate a monarch and earn the respect of a queen. So when a young Camilla at her boarding school Queen's Gate would reportedly boast to her friends, "My great-grandmother was the lover of the king. We're practically royal," it was more than just a childish brag. It was an early glimpse into her worldview. From a young age, she understood that power and influence weren't always found in official titles. Sometimes they were found in the private connections, the whispered secrets behind closed doors, and the sheer force of one's personality. This heritage gave her a unique confidence, a certain swagger that set her apart from the more demure girls of her generation. But it also placed upon her the immense pressure of expectation. She was a Shand, and a cubit from her mother's side. She was the descendant of Alice Keppel. Great things, which meant a great marriage, were expected of her, and yet the young Camilla seemed gloriously unbothered by these lofty expectations. She was, by all accounts, a total tomboy. While other girls were practicing their posture, Camilla was out riding her pony, falling off, and getting right back on again. She was confident, outdoorsy, and had a raucous laugh that could fill a room. She was known for being more interested in talking about hunting and horses than about fashion and hairstyles. At school, she wasn't an academic star, far from it. She was popular and fun, the girl everyone wanted to be friends with, but her grades were mediocre at best. There's a famous story that her headmistress at Queen's Gate once told her, with a sigh of resignation, "The only hope for you, Camilla, is to marry someone who lives in a big house in the country." In a way, it was a prophecy. It was a blunt assessment of the limited options available to a young woman of her class and time, and it was a path Camilla seemed destined to follow. After finishing school, she did a stint at a finishing school in Switzerland and then studied French in Paris, the classic polishing off process for a debutante in waiting. Then, in 1965, it was time. Camilla Shand came out into society. It was a whirlwind year of cocktail parties, race meetings at Ascot, and glittering balls where she and hundreds of other hopeful young women in white dresses were paraded before the most eligible bachelors in Britain. This was the marketplace, and Camilla, with her confidence, her sharp wit, and her impressive lineage, was a prize catch. It was in this heady, competitive social scene that she would first meet a dashing young cavalry officer named Camilla Parker Bowles, and not long after, her life would become entangled forever with that of the lonely young prince who was destined to be king. But the young Camilla was anything but a delicate English rose waiting to be picked. She was a paradox, really. On one hand, she was fully a product of her class, destined for the debutante circuit, but on the other she possessed a spirit that chafed against its confines. Friends from her school days remember her not as shy or demure, but as a boisterous, confident tomboy with a magnetic personality. You can just picture her, much happier in muddy boots and jodhpurs than in pearls and a party dress, her booming laugh echoing across a stable yard. She was known for being fiercely loyal and down to earth, but also for an almost startling self-assurance, especially around boys. In a world of polite, curated femininity, Camilla was unapologetically herself. Her academic record was, to put it mildly, unremarkable. It simply didn't interest her. The classroom was a place of rules and rote learning, while the real world outside was far more exciting. She left Queen's Gate School with just one O-level qualification, a pass in home and community affairs, a subject that tells you everything you need to know about the expectations for young women at the time. As was tradition, she was then sent to a finishing school in Switzerland and later studied French literature in Paris. This wasn't about building a career. It was about applying a final coat of social polish before entering the marriage market. Her early career, if you can even call it that, was a series of brief, almost comical stints that proved her heart was never in the 9-to-5 world. She worked as a secretary, but was quickly fired, legend has it, because her employer was infuriated by her lack of focus. She then took a job as a receptionist at the impossibly chic interior design firm Sybil Colfax and John Fowler on Bond Street. It was a position that required poise, punctuality, and professionalism. Camilla, fresh from a late-night party, reportedly possessed none of these on one fateful morning. She was summarily dismissed by the formidable John Fowler himself. For Camilla, these jobs were just distractions, a way to pass the time between social engagements. It was clear that a traditional career path held little interest for her. Her real education was happening elsewhere, in the drawing rooms and ballrooms of high society, and in the vibrant, changing world of 1960s London. In 1965, she officially came out as a debutante. This was her moment. She moved into a large apartment in Kensington with other aristocratic friends, living a life of parties, social events, and a string of well-connected boyfriends. A friend from that time recalled that the goal for girls in their circle was simple. You were expected to marry well, and preferably someone with a title. This was the height of the swinging 60s, and while the debutante world was a gilded cage of tradition, the pulse of rock and roll and a new sense of social freedom could be felt even there. Camilla and her friends were part of the Chelsea set, a glamorous tribe of young elites who flitted between country weekends and London nightclubs. It was in this whirlwind that she had her first serious romance with a young man named Kevin Burke, the handsome son of the creator of the Aston Martin. For a time, they were inseparable, but the relationship eventually fizzled out, and Camilla, with her characteristic lack of sentimentality, moved on. And then she met the man who would dominate her life before Prince Charles ever entered the picture, Andrew Parker Bowles. If Camilla was confident, Andrew was in another league entirely. A dashing officer in the household cavalry, 7 years her senior, he was a social superstar. He was impossibly charming, witty, and had a reputation as one of the most accomplished womanizers in London. He was, as one acquaintance put it, a magnificent beast of a man, and women were drawn to him like moths to a flame. He was an excellent polo player, a passion that put him directly in the orbit of the royal family, and he even had a brief dalliance with Princess Anne. The on-again, off-again romance between Camilla Shand and Andrew Parker Bowles became the stuff of society legend throughout the late 60s and early 70s. Their connection was electric, a fiery mix of passion and frustration. He would break her heart with his philandering, and she would retaliate, refusing to be a doormat. Yet they always seemed to find their way back to each other. He was exciting, dangerous, and utterly captivating. For a young woman like Camilla, who was never one to shy away from a challenge, he was an irresistible force. It was this tumultuous, intoxicating relationship that shaped Camilla's understanding of love and loyalty, and it was the complicated backdrop against which another man, a shy and thoughtful prince, was about to make his entrance. Camilla was deeply in love, but Andrew's wandering eye was a constant source of heartbreak. He would disappear from her life, only to reappear with that irresistible charm, and the cycle would begin anew. It was an exhausting emotional roller coaster, and by 1971, Camilla was growing weary of the game. Then everything changed. The popular myth is that Camilla met Prince Charles at a polo match, where she supposedly quipped, "My great-grandmother was the mistress of your great-great-grandfather. I feel we have something in common." It's a great line, but it never happened. The truth is, they were introduced by a mutual friend from Cambridge, a Chilean historian's daughter named Lucia Santa Cruz. She thought these two, with their shared love of the countryside and similar sense of humor, would get along. She had no idea what she was about to set in motion. The connection was instant and profound. It wasn't about titles or lineage. They bonded not over shared ancestral scandal, but over a shared, slightly goofy sense of humor and a love for the comedy of the Goon Show. For Charles, a sensitive, often lonely young man suffocated by the rigid formality of his position, Camilla was a breath of fresh air. She was warm, funny, and completely unpretentious. She wasn't impressed by his title. She was interested in him. She listened to his anxieties about his future, laughed at his jokes, and treated him not as a prince, but as a man. He could finally be himself. He fell for her hard. Their romance blossomed over the next 18 months. It was an idyllic period of country walks, quiet dinners, and long phone calls. For Charles, this was it. He had found his soulmate, the woman he wanted to marry. He wrote in his letters about the blissful, peaceful, and mutually happy relationship they shared. But the royal family and the centuries-old institution it represented had other ideas. The so-called firm had a checklist for a future queen, and Camilla Shand, despite her aristocratic background, did not tick the right boxes. She was not considered suitable princess material. For one, she had a past. She had lived. She had loved. Her long and very public relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles meant she was not the virginal bride the monarchy demanded for its heir. Charles's beloved great-uncle and mentor, Lord Mountbatten, had given him explicit advice on the matter. A man in his position should have as many affairs as he could before settling down, but for a wife, he must choose a suitable, attractive, and sweet-charactered girl before she has met anyone else she might fall for. Camilla, experienced and worldly, simply didn't fit the mold. While Charles was wrestling with his duty versus his heart, he was deployed overseas with the Royal Navy in early 1973 for an 8-month tour. He was torn, unable to defy his family, but heartbroken at the thought of leaving her without a commitment. He left believing, perhaps naively, that things would simply remain as they were until he returned. While Charles was thousands of miles away, the London social scene moved on. Andrew Parker Bowles, perhaps sensing an opportunity or finally ready to settle down, was back in Camilla's life. He proposed. Imagine being in her shoes. She was 26 years old, an age where the pressure to marry was immense. The man she had been in a passionate, albeit painful relationship with for years was finally on one knee. The prince she was falling in love with was absent, silent, and seemingly unable to commit. Caught between a tangible reality and a royal fantasy, Camilla made her choice. She accepted. To add another layer of pressure, it's been widely reported that both of their fathers, tired of the endless drama, colluded to place an engagement announcement in the Times newspaper, effectively forcing their children's hands. The news reached Charles by letter while he was stationed in the West Indies. Friends said he was utterly devastated. He poured his heart out in a letter to Lord Mountbatten, writing, "I suppose the feeling of emptiness will pass eventually." For Charles, it was the end of a dream. For Camilla, it was the beginning of a life that was secure and socially acceptable, but one that would soon leave her feeling just as empty. On July 4th, 1973, Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles in what was dubbed the Society Wedding of the Year. The ceremony was grand, attended by royals like the Queen Mother and Princess Anne. Camilla had made her choice, and she seemed to settle into the life expected of her. They went on to have 2 children, Tom and Laura, and from the outside, they were the picture of a charming, well-connected upper-class family. In a move that seems astonishing today and speaks volumes about the insular, complex relationships of their circle, Prince Charles was named the godfather to Camilla's son Tom. This wasn't seen as scandalous at the time, it was simply what one did. It cemented his place as a permanent, official friend of the family. On the surface, life went on. But behind the facade of country weekends and polite society, the marriage was complicated. Andrew's reputation as a ladies' man didn't end at the altar, and his infidelities were a poorly kept secret among their friends. For years, Camilla endured it, playing the role of the dutiful wife. As the years went on, and as Charles's own desperately unhappy marriage to Princess Diana began to crumble under the pressure of public duty and private misery, his friendship with Camilla became his lifeline. They understood each other in a way no one else could. In the quiet of her country home, he wasn't the Prince of Wales. He was just Charles, a man trapped in a gilded cage. Their bond, which had never truly broken, reignited into something more. By 1986, they were lovers, once again. This was the beginning of the great royal secret, a dangerous game played out in country houses and whispered phone calls. They had code names for each other, Fred and Gladys, but it was a secret that couldn't be kept. Diana knew. She felt Camilla's presence everywhere. She later spoke of the torment of being the third person in her own marriage, of the crushing feeling that she could never truly win her husband's heart. For Diana, and soon for the world, Camilla was the shadow in her marriage, the architect of her pain, the Rottweiler, as she would bitterly call her. That private drama was about to explode into a public scandal of epic proportions. In 1992, journalist Andrew Morton published his bombshell book, Diana, Her True Story, based on secret tapes smuggled out of the palace from the princess herself. The book laid bare the misery of the royal marriage and, for the first time, named Camilla Parker Bowles as the other woman. The whispers were now headlines. Camilla was thrust from the society pages onto the front page, cast as the villain in the nation's fairy tale. Then in 1993, the scandal reached its humiliating climax with Camillagate. An intimate 8-minute phone conversation between Charles and Camilla, recorded years earlier, was leaked to the press. The cringe-worthy, deeply personal details, including Charles's now infamous desire to be reincarnated as her tampon, were printed in newspapers around the globe. The publication of the tape was a catastrophe. It stripped them of all dignity, turning their profound love into a cheap international punchline. Amid this public demolition, she was also dealing with a quiet, profound personal tragedy. In 1994, her beloved mother, Rosalind, died after a long and painful battle with osteoporosis. Camilla was at her bedside watching the woman who had been her anchor slip away, all while the world outside was mocking her. A year later, her own marriage officially ended when she and Andrew Parker Bowles divorced. The same year, Princess Diana gave her now infamous BBC Panorama interview. Watched by over 20 million people in the UK alone, she looked directly into the camera and uttered the immortal line, "Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." That single devastating sentence sealed Camilla's fate in the public imagination. She was no longer just an adulteress. She was the woman who had crowded out the queen of people's hearts. There was no coming back from that. And then the unthinkable happened. On August 31st, 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, was killed in a car crash in Paris. The world erupted in a tidal wave of grief and anger. In the search for someone to blame, public fury turned on the press, the royal family, and, with a terrifying intensity, on Camilla Parker Bowles. She became the focal point for the world's rage, branded the most hated woman in Britain. She was forced into hiding, a virtual prisoner in her own home, as the press laid siege outside. The woman who had once been the confident heart of the party was now a public pariah, facing a future of complete uncertainty and universal scorn. For Camilla Parker Bowles, this was rock bottom. The world erupted in an unprecedented outpouring of grief and anger, and much of that anger was directed at the royal family, at Prince Charles, and by extension at the woman who was seen as the cause of all of Diana's suffering, Camilla Parker Bowles. In the wake of Diana's death, she became public enemy number one. It was the absolute nadir of her life. To most observers, any future she might have had with Prince Charles was now impossible. Their love story, it seemed, was finally irrevocably over. But they were wrong, because while Camilla vanished from public view, a figure so toxic she was effectively radioactive, a ghost at the royal feast, a quiet, methodical plan was being hatched behind the scenes. What happened next was one of the most remarkable and carefully orchestrated public relations campaigns in modern history. It was a journey back from the abyss, and it began with one audacious goal: to transform a pariah into a future queen. The strategy was masterminded by Mark Bolland, Prince Charles's shrewd deputy private secretary. It was a war of attrition, fought with patience. The first major breakthrough came in January 1999, when Charles and Camilla were photographed together for the first time as a couple leaving the Ritz Hotel in London. The next hurdle was winning over the Queen. In 2000, the Queen attended a party where Camilla was hostess, a quiet but seismic signal that the frost was beginning to thaw. But the campaign wasn't just about photo opportunities. It was about giving Camilla a new story. Haunted by the agonizing death of her mother from osteoporosis, she threw herself into charity work for the cause, becoming president of the National Osteoporosis Society in 2001. This wasn't a token patronage, it was deeply personal. She became a fierce advocate for survivors of sexual assault and championed literacy. From 2005 to 2022, she would undertake a staggering 3,886 official engagements. She wasn't just standing by Charles's side, she was building a legacy of her own. But the path to acceptance was far from smooth. In 2005, when she and Charles finally announced their engagement, the reaction was deeply divided. Public opinion polls at the time, such as those conducted by YouGov and Ipsos Mori, revealed that a significant portion of the British public, around 40 to 50% in various surveys, opposed the marriage, citing lingering loyalty to Princess Diana and viewing Camilla as a divisive figure in the royal family's history. Media coverage was intense and often critical, with tabloids revisiting the infamous Camilla-gate tapes from the 1990s that had exposed their affair. Their wedding was a modest civil ceremony, not a grand state occasion. Held on April 9, 2005, at Windsor Guildhall, it was attended by about 30 close family members and friends, followed by a blessing at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, led by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Notably absent were Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, who attended the blessing, but not the civil service, a decision interpreted as a subtle nod to the Church of England's views on divorce at the time. In a crucial concession to public sentiment, it was announced that Camilla would not take the title Princess of Wales, so inextricably linked to Diana. Instead, she would be Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cornwall. This choice was strategic, as the title Princess of Wales carried immense emotional weight due to Diana's popularity and tragic death in 1997, and using it could have reignited public outrage. Camilla also adopted the title Duchess of Rothesay in Scotland to align with Charles's Scottish titles. Even as Duchess, the dangers were real. In 2010, the car she and Charles were in was attacked by student protesters. The incident occurred on December 9, 2010, during widespread demonstrations in London against tuition fee increases, where protesters surrounded their Rolls-Royce, chanting slogans like "off with their heads," smashing a window, and splattering paint on the vehicle. Camilla was reportedly poked with a stick through the broken glass, highlighting the physical risks of royal life amid social unrest. A year later, it was revealed she had been a target in the phone hacking scandal. This stemmed from the News International phone hacking revelations, where journalists from News of the World illegally accessed voicemails of celebrities and royals. Camilla's communications were among those hacked, leading to her testifying in the Leveson inquiry in 2012 about the invasion of privacy and its emotional toll. And through it all, she endured further personal loss. Her charismatic brother, Mark Shand, with whom she shared a deep bond, died tragically in 2014. Shand, a noted conservationist and founder of the Elephant Family Charity, passed away at age 62 after slipping and hitting his head outside a New York hotel following a fundraising event. His death not only deprived Camilla of a sibling who had been a source of joy and adventure in her life, but also drew attention to her family's involvement in wildlife preservation, a cause she later championed more actively. It was another devastating blow, another private grief to be weathered under the public gaze. Compounding this, Camilla had already navigated other family challenges, including her own divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles in 1995, and the complexities of blending families with Charles's sons, William and Harry, amid ongoing media scrutiny. For 17 years, Camilla served as the Duchess of Cornwall, with a quiet dignity and an unflagging work ethic. During this period, she undertook over 200 official engagements annually, focusing on causes like literacy promotion through the National Literacy Trust, osteoporosis awareness, inspired by her mother's battle with the disease, and support for victims of domestic abuse via organizations such as Safe Lives. She earned a reputation for being stoic, funny, and fiercely supportive of her husband. Her humor was often highlighted in anecdotes, such as her light-hearted quips during public appearances, which helped humanize her image, while her stoicism shone through in handling criticism without public retorts. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, public opinion began to shift. The hatred faded, replaced by a grudging and then a genuine respect. This evolution was tracked in opinion polls. By the late 2010s, surveys from firms like BMG Research showed approval ratings for Camilla rising to around 55 to 60%, attributed to her low-key approach, charitable work, and the passage of time allowing younger generations less influenced by the Diana era to form opinions based on her current role. The final definitive seal of approval came from the Queen herself. In February 2022, Queen Elizabeth II stated her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort as she continues her own loyal service. It was the ultimate validation. This announcement, made in a message marking the 70th anniversary of her accession, was seen as a deliberate effort to clarify Camilla's future title and quell any remaining controversy, reflecting the Queen's recognition of Camilla's contributions over nearly 2 decades and her role in stabilizing Charles's life. When Queen Elizabeth died in September 2022 and Charles became King Charles III, Camilla stood by his side, no longer as Duchess, but as Queen Consort Camilla. The transition occurred on September 8, 2022, at Balmoral Castle, and Camilla immediately assumed duties supporting the new monarch, including accompanying him on his first official engagements as king. At their coronation in May 2023, she was crowned alongside her husband. The ceremony on May 6, 2023, at Westminster Abbey was a historic event. Blending tradition with modernity, Camilla wore Queen Mary's crown, modified to include diamonds from Elizabeth II's collection, and her anointing symbolized her elevated status. The woman who was once a secret, then a scandal, and then a pariah, was now officially queen. Her journey from the shadows to the throne was complete. This arc not only underscored themes of redemption and resilience in the British monarchy, but also highlighted shifting societal attitudes toward divorce, second marriages, and personal growth within public institutions, setting a precedent for future royal narratives. The story of Queen Camilla is one of the most extraordinary and complex in modern royal history. It's not a fairy tale. There was no glass slipper, and for a long time she was cast as the wicked stepmother. Her life is a testament to endurance, a study in the slow, complicated currents of public forgiveness. Was she a homewrecker who callously broke up a beloved marriage? Or was she one part of a tragic three-person story, a woman who simply refused to give up on the great love of her life, no matter the cost? The debate will likely continue, but what is undeniable is her resilience. She absorbed decades of public scorn, personal tragedy, and relentless pressure without ever cracking. She played the long game, believing in her love for Charles and her ultimate place by his side. From the confident young debutante who joked about waiting for a king, to the vilified mistress in hiding, to the diligent duchess, and finally to the crowned queen, Camilla's life has been a quiet lesson in survival. It's a story that proves that sometimes, in the rigid world of monarchy, the most powerful force isn't a title or a bloodline, but the stubborn, unwavering loyalty of the human heart.